Welcome to another episode of the Straight Up Chicago Investor Podcast. We have another Straight Up Tuesday tip. I'm here with Mark Ainley as always, and Sharad Mehta is our guest today. Sharad, welcome. How are you doing?
Good, Tom. Thank you for having me. Thank you, Mark, for having me on the show, man. I'm excited.
So we pulled Sharad in. I initially got synced up with him after he was on the 𝗵𝗶𝗵𝗵𝗁 podcast, probably many years ago. But today's question is going to be around automation. And Sharad has done over, at the time, 400, 500 deals, some insane amount over like a 5 or 6 year period, most of them being in Northwest Indiana, while he was running his tiring business from his home in California and now from Canada. So right. He has not been in the US in 18 months or so, and he's still cranking out deals every single month, just on a pure automated system. So when we talk about scaling and just not doing the mundane tasks, this is the man that has it figured out here. Also the founder and president of 𝗬𝘃𝗲𝗀𝗵𝗁, a cloud-based system that allows you to automate tasks. We'll kind of come into our conversation later today. So Sharad, the question is, a lot of our listeners have a 3-unit, they have a 4-unit, they're doing their second deal, they're doing a third deal, but they're doing one deal at a time. Can you talk a little bit about how to automate tasks so that they can scale at a much quicker rate? When you're first getting started, what are some low-hanging fruit that they can look to do to take this to the next level at a much quicker pace? Because no one ever feels like they're moving quick enough.
Absolutely. I think some of the things that you have to keep in mind is, as you scale, it's easier to get your first or second deal. But as you scale your business, you have to have systems in place that are, repeatable and that you can add automations to. Like when I first started investing, I literally used to have a legal, pad and paper. That was good enough for me at that time, but it wasn't scalable. It wasn't repeatable. And I definitely could not, I guess it was repeatable. I could just write on every property address and conversation, but I could not add any automations to it. And generally the next evolution of that is for somebody to use like a Google Sheets or Excel. It's repeatable. There's some automations that you can add, but if you really want to scale to the next level, then you have to have a system that's repeatable, scalable, and then you can automate pretty much everything in your business. So that's what we do. We have our entire pipeline built out from the time a lead comes in to the time we actually sell the property. Everything we have, checklists built into our system. So simple example I'll give you is, let's say you sell a property, for example. There's certain things that need to be done. You need to call the water department, you need to call the utility department to get the utility shut off. You need to call your insurance company to get the insurance canceled. Now, all of those things, you don't want to have to set up a checklist for every property. You want to automate that. So as soon as that happens, it's automated. Same thing on when a lead comes in. There's certain things you need to do. If you have the property address, you need to run comps. You need to call and you get a property under contract. You need to send the contract to the escrow company. You need to order inspection. You need to send the listing out to your cash buyers if you're wholesaling, depending on what your exit strategy might be. So that's where you want to put those automations in your business. So you're not having to think about those tasks every time a new property comes in.
All right. So, everything you're saying, everyone knows on a bit by bit basis, and they learn it over many, many years, right? All these different steps. Like, at what point of your investing career, or did you kind of have that aha moment? Like, man, if I want to grow, I got to do X, and to do X, sure, I could just simply do this. Like, kind of, what was your kind of wake up moment, or your aha moment?
I read the book 𝗬𝗵𝗶𝗵𝗵 by Michael Gerber. That was a big inspiration. So what I started doing was, we do, so just a little bit background. So we do about 40, 50 deals a year in Northwest India. And I would say half of those are your typical fix and flip. The other half are your retail, your turnkey properties to other investors. So when we were doing this, we started realizing, okay, a lot of what we're doing is the same thing over and over again to every property. And around that time, I read the book 𝗬𝗵𝗶𝗵𝗁. So what I did was I started creating a list of the SKUs that we're using on our properties, right? Toilet, light fixtures, all the faucet, the paint color. So then next time if we're doing a project, we don't even have to think about what needs to be done. It literally now at this point, my project manager, we do about 40, 50 flips. She actually lives in California. We don't even have anybody living in Indiana other than an acquisition manager. So imagine our project manager is managing all our rehab from California. Some of these are pretty expensive rehab, like $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 rehab. And she hasn't been in Indiana in about a couple of years now. She's been with me for 6 years, managing my rehabs. And then she visits Indiana no more than once every 18 months to 2 years.
So a lot of people listening to this are thinking like, come on, every contractor's ripped me off in my career so far. Like how,
what are to us also. Yeah.
What are the checks and balances you put in place to be able to, I mentioned just you take some additional steps to make sure that these things don't happen, but what are some things if you're going to start automating or doing things remotely that people have to, that you've done to make sure that, your boots on the ground is not going to turn into lack of quality or lack of getting things done?
Yeah, a couple of things. When you're hiring a contractor, I try to get referrals from people that you trust in the business, and they've used those contractors. So let's say Mark, if we guys are going to work together, right? I'm going to ask you, hey, do you guys know any contractor that you would recommend for this project? And then if I have a relationship with you and then you've used somebody for some time, then I can trust you. So that, I have that trust factor built in. But if I'm starting out new and I don't have those referrals, then what I would do is I'm not going to give somebody that I don't know, I have never worked with, a $50,000 project. I might give them a small job. I mean, even if I have a big rehab, I might just break it out into 5 or 6 different scopes. And I might say, okay, I'm going to give you $2,000 just for the demo. I'm going to see how you do. Then they're going to have to earn their business by every single job that they're doing, and not just a blank check that I'm going to write. Hey, it's a $50,000 rehab. Here's the $50,000. Just call me when the project is finished. So some of the things we used to do was, we buy a lot, we buy everything in Northwest Indiana. So we don't buy our own materials now, but when we used to, we're one of the largest buyers at Home Depot in Hammond. So we would go there, we would go to the pro desk, and we would ask people working at the pro desk, hey, do you have anybody that you recommend that can, has some availability to help us on a project? If you're at the pro desk, talking to people working there, they can give you some referrals. If there's a contractor coming in every day, certain things that you want with a contractor is they show up on time. So if you see a contractor picking up his material every day at 6 a.m, that's a really, really good sign, being there every day. So those small things. And then, once we had a relationship with Home Depot Pro Desk, then we would ask them, hey, do you know anybody? Go to your local RIA meetings, connect with guys like you, that have a big network, and ask them, hey, do you recommend anybody? And then just start from there. And start out with a small project, break the entire big project into small chunks and just let them earn their business on that.
Sharad, I want to go back real quickly. You mentioned automation. Can you describe the difference between checklist and automation? Because I think a lot of our listeners know, hey, at closing, I have to do X, Y, Z. But then how do you take it the next step to not actually have to physically do every little tactical step?
Right. Yeah, the automation would be where, let's say if, going back to selling a property, right? It's embarrassing, but, it's happened to us where we would sell a property. We used to sell a property and somebody would forget to, cancel the utility. I'm sure it's happened to other investors, and one time we didn't even realize until, we had paid water bill for 9 months because that was all automated, somebody forgot to, yeah. But now, so that's the perfect example. So now we have a checklist. As soon as the property goes into sold status, there's 10 things we have in our checklist that spits out. And somebody in my team is responsible. So it creates an automated checklist for everybody. So for insurance, we have it down to the point where property is sold. Somebody needs to inform the insurance company. There's a task for somebody to inform the insurance company. And there's a task created 2 months later for us to check, hey, did we get an insurance check back and was it deposited in our bank or not? So one thing is canceling the insurance policy, but there's generally a refund that's due to you. Then we have a task for 2 months later to make sure we actually got the check back and somebody deposited it and we have a credit in our account. So those things are all automated in our system. So now we have absolutely no excuse for it to happen ever again. If it does happen, that means somebody didn't do their task. They just marked it completed and didn't actually do that. So then we can go back and see who the task was assigned to. And if they marked it completed, that they didn't actually do it.
So tell us about what you're using though for that, because a lot of this word automation scares people because they don't know how to do it, or they don't know what to. There's so many options out there for that might not even be the whole solution. But tell us what you've used or what you've created to kind of help you with that.
Yeah. So in 2015, August 2000, I was living in Chicago, actually South Loop, until August 2015, and then in August 2015, I moved to San Diego. And that's where I started looking at my business. I wasn't really using any systems or processes until then. And that's when I started looking at my business and said, okay, how do I get my entire team to be on one platform? And how can I automate as much as possible and still have a good, check on my business using the data? So we didn't really find anything that would fit what we were doing. So we actually ended up creating our own software, 𝗲𝘃𝗃. So I'm the owner and founder of 𝗲𝘃𝗃. Where I have everybody on my team on one platform, from my team that's doing cold calling to my acquisition manager, to my project manager, my office manager. Everybody is on the same platform, and that's where we have all the automations done in our system. And the need honestly was it started out as a personal need where I wanted something where I could manage my entire business. Honestly, in the hindsight, if I had not moved out of Chicago, I probably would not have even created a system, because then, I would have been really actively involved myself in the business. And maybe, I wouldn't have seen the need to just kind of step away and look at my entire business from like a 10,000 feet view.
Yep. What about the person who has, call it 3 units, 8 units, 10 units? Is this something that's overkill for them, or should they be looking at something like your platform or a competitor? Like, at what point does it make sense that, I should be making this investment?
I think it makes sense. I personally think it makes sense. I mean, they don't have to use our system. They could use any system that they prefer. But if they're looking to buy more deals, if they're doing any sort of marketing to get deals in their business, then they have to have a system. For most investors, we have investors using our platform that are doing 1-2 deal year, to people that are doing 10 deals a month, 120, 150 deals a year. But the challenge comes in, typically for most investor, marketing is going to be one of their biggest, if not the biggest expense in their business. And the challenge that happens is, if you're not being very efficient with your marketing, or if you're not optimizing your marketing to get the highest ROI, you're going to leave a lot of money on the table. An example I would give you is, let's say you have 2 lists, you're doing direct mail. You pull a list of your absentee and you pull a list of your probate. Let's say for this example, you have 1,000 people on your absentee list, 1,000 people on your probate list, right? You put them together in one file and you send direct mail out. You use one phone number on your marketing list. You send it out, you get 100 calls, and you get 1 deal out of it. Now, when you do, you say, hey, this is great. I want to do more marketing. But how do you know whether it was the absentee list that actually gave you calls, or whether it was the probate list? That's where the data tracking becomes really important. That's where the automation becomes really important. The other step is, most of the people that are going to call you from your marketing, if it's inbound marketing, your direct mail, or, your cold calling, they're not going to call and say, hey, I'm interested. It's a $200,000 house. It needs $50,000. I want $75,000 for it. It happens sometimes, if you do enough deal, it will happen. But most of the people are going to say, okay, how much are you willing to offer? No, I'm not interested. Maybe call me 6 months later. Most of your deals, like 70 to 80%, are going to come from those follow-ups. I think that's where a lot of investors starting out leave a lot of money on the table, because they're not doing follow-ups. To give you an example, let's say from your auto industry. Let's say you're not in a market to buy a car, and there's a Toyota dealership in your market, and you get one postcard every quarter from your Toyota dealership, right? Saying, hey, we have July 4th sale going on. We have Labor Day sale going on. You're not in the market to buy. You look at it, you toss it out, right? Now imagine a year from now, your car breaks down. You are in a market to buy a car. Just because they have been sending you that one postcard every quarter, they planted that seed in your mind that there's that they have some deals going on. There's a good chance that you're going to give them a call. right? Or you're going to reach out to them. That's kind of what you're doing with your marketing, with the automations that you're setting up in your business. A lot of deals that we get, like we closed one deal, actually we're closing one this month. And we had actually gotten that lead last year in the summertime. But for some reason, numbers didn't work out. All we did was we just set them an automated drip follow-up. We were sending them a text message and we were calling them every other month. That's all we were doing. And they called us last month. The situation has changed. Now they're ready to sell and we're buying that deal. So I think that's where a lot of investors leave money on the table. They might think, okay, I'm just starting out. I've done only 1 deal, 2 deals. I don't need that system. There's a lot of money you could leave on the table by not automating your follow-ups or just not following up with the leads. You don't have to use a system. I mean, if you're good enough, you could use a legal pad and just write down, okay, I need to call this person on 12th of the month. I need to send this person a text message on 15th of the month. You could do that if you want to, but as you start getting more and more leads, something should be automated in your system.
I love it. Sharad, we got to have you back on to talk in detail about direct marketing, because I think that follow-up piece is one that everyone, myself included, it just needs improvement on.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, now we've done it to the point, like, let's say if I get a lead from PPC. So we track our PPC, whether a lead comes in through my website or it comes in through my missed call, right? So we've automated it. Let's say if somebody calls into our PPC number, they call a couple of times, they hang up, they just automatically get on a drip campaign. Just by default, they get on a drip campaign. We'll keep sending them text messages until they call us back or until they're ready to schedule a call with us. That's where we see, we look at other investors that are doing high volume. That's where they make their money, is on the follow-ups.
That's awesome. Good stuff there. Mark, anything else to add?
No, I definitely want to have him back out on the marketing wholesaling side.
Nice. All right, so we'll wrap here with our Chicago fact, and it's not multiple choice. I'll let you guys both guess on this one here. So, all right, so 𝗏𝗏𝗵𝗁, who's the original owner of the Palmer Hotel, one of my favorite spots here. His wife, for the World Fair, wanted to make a treat that had the texture of a cake, but was small enough to fit in a lunchbox. So this treat was created in Chicago. Mark, what is this delicious treat? Texture of a cake, small enough to fit in a lunchbox.
Can I take a guess?
Twinkie.
Sharad, go for it.
That was going to be my answer, Twinkie.
So the Twinkie was also invented in Chicago. So you guys are right there. This is the brownie. We are responsible for the Twinkie and the brownie, guys.
I was going to say brownie, but I didn't know that was I didn't know that was that specific of a creation. All right. Wow. Okay.
It's on the internet.
Wow.
So it's
true then. If it's on the internet, it is absolutely 100% true, because internet has never been wrong about anything.
Yeah, you're going to have to come up with some questions. I read through it, but I sent you that article last time of where the 25 streets came from.
Yep.
Who they got.
Yeah, but I didn't want to ask you because you sent me the article.
Yeah, I know, but it would have been tough otherwise. So that's kind of like my, I had to study for the test. I just can't look at it while I take the test.
Okay, that's fair.
All right, everybody. Thank you for joining us here for the Tuesday Tip. We'll see you on Thursday. Make sure you leave us a review and refer us to a friend. Check out our website. We have a lot of awesome resources on there for you guys specifically. We literally try to find whatever we can to put up there so we can add value to each one of our listeners. So we'll see you Thursday and have a good week. Bye.
Thanks all.